Okay, before we move on to the witnesses, there's a bit more film, photographic, and also we need to look at some or consider some audio evidence, but there are also some loose ends from part 2 that we maybe need to backtrack on. I think also we kind of skipped over the limousine a bit because we got sidetracked by the bullets, which took us onto the guns. So first, Chase, should we just go back to the limousine? Sorry, Jace?
Should we go to the loose ends? Should we do the loose ends first?
Yeah, I before we do the loose ends, well, the limousine is a loose end because we did talk about it, but it was really brief. But to me, it's very similar to the body in that it was illegally removed and immediately washed and rebuilt. So again, that would be, I don't know whether it would be inadmissible, but it would be spoiled evidence at least. So
certainly evidence tampering.
Yeah. So have you any thoughts on what, if we'd had the limousine to look at, what would it have told us?
Well, obviously the first thing would have been, was the windshield shattered or penetrated or both? Which would then define one way or the other whether it was struck from in front or behind. I think obviously there would be the possibility of being able to work out bullet trajectory from the one that hit Governor Connolly, because that Sose actually struck part or parts of the vehicle as well. I don't think you could really determine anything about the shots that struck Kennedy because they didn't touch any part of the vehicle. But certainly if any part of the bullet passed through him, any fragment or anything like that would have ended up in the footwell of the vehicle, either in the front or the back. Therefore, that's evidence. Yeah. Lots of things. I mean, it is, like you say, it is what it is. It's the whole car itself is evidence. It's a crime scene. The car is a crime scene. How often do you ever move a crime scene? I mean, I know they had to get him away from the scene. They had to get him to hospital, and that, in the heat of the moment, that would probably be the thing to do, right? You've got a driver who's fit and well and active. Get your bloody foot down. That's what I'd be saying. If I was in that vehicle, I wouldn't be saying, let's park it up and let's wait for an ambulance. That's for sure. But the minute it got to the hospital and Kennedy was, removed from that vehicle should have then been secured.
Yeah.
On
absolutely.
the spot. On the spot there and then,
Yeah. Again,
as it was, it had loads of people leaning into it, opening it, bloody cleaning it.
Yeah.
Journalists leaning in, taking photographs, blah 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 blah.
Yeah,
and it was contaminated from the minute it got there.
Yeah. As I said before, the two guys seem to be wielding more power than they should have been allowed to. Like as we said, whether they did it or not, I mean, is beside the point. They are two suspects. So they were along with the body. They should have been nowhere near the body. They should have been nowhere near the car. I mean, and yet there they are, allowed to interfere with the chain of evidence.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, I think
putting themselves above the law.
yeah.
Yeah.
So okay, so we've hopefully we can look at the limousine indirectly through the photographs in the film, even if we think some or all of that's also been messed around with. So view through the film and through the film or the photos, what have you noticed of anything about the limousine? Is there anything you'd like to say about the limousine through that through the imagery on the films or the photographs?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing about that particular Lincoln Continental limousine was that it was specifically designed to have a bulletproof glass domed roof, right? And the reason it was meant to have a glass domed roof was because it still allowed the president to be fully visible without being in any danger. And somebody gave the order for that bubble to be removed, right? Now, that in itself overrides and any kind of security protocol that was always in place up to that point. That overrides that. So who gave that order to override it? It certainly wasn't Kennedy, that's for sure. And it certainly wasn't Jackie either. Although the Warren Commission states that the order was given because they felt that the waving public could feel closer to the president and it would gain them votes. Well, I think that's nonsense, to be honest. I think that's absolute nonsense. But anyway, that's neither here nor there what we're trying to sort of cover. But the fact is that bubble was removed, right? Which instantly put the president in danger instantly, even before he got in the car, right? That was always going to increase the need for additional or extra protocols to be put in place to protect him. And if I'd have been, I mean, I know it's easy to say it, but if I'd have been in that security detachment or in the CIA that were, protecting the president, and somebody says, we're not having the bubble on, I'd be like thinking, well, how are we going to step up the need to protect him? The first thing I'd be saying is, you're wearing a bulletproof vest. I know that wouldn't have saved him because the headshot was the fatal one. But the fact remains, he wasn't issued a bulletproof vest. Neither was Jackie, neither was Governor Connolly, neither was the driver, neither was the guy in the passenger seat in the front, right? None of them were issued with a bulletproof vest. And you've got to be thinking, well, why not? If a bulletproof bubble has been removed from the vehicle. That's my number one question, which has always been burning a hole in the back of my mind.
Yeah.
The car is issued with, or was made to have running boards on the back, as you can see. That one guy does actually get up on that running board, but I'd be saying, right, well, okay, the bubble's off. I'm going to have somebody on those running boards permanently, one either side, because in a way, they would be protecting the president. Yes, they might be in line of fire, but that's their job at the end of the day. All right. If you haven't got a clean shot on the president, you're not going to worry about shooting a security guard, are you? You're not going to do it. If you haven't got a clean shot, you're not going to take the shot.
That's your job.
All right.
Sure.
That's your job, right? So yeah. So why did the guy have to run after the thing and leap up there once the shots had been fired? He should have already been on the bloody car, as far as I'm concerned. Why was the speed of it reduced? Because it should have been traveling at a mandatory speed and that speed was reduced. So again, that's breaking the normal security protocol. Why were the outriders so far away from the vehicle? Again, the bubble's been removed, so you're thinking, let's get that close protection going on. The thing is, when you're driving that close to a crowd, you're not going to remove that bubble. You're just not going to remove it. It's not like he's like being viewed from afar.
Yeah, I think
any one person in that crowd that you see in all of those video footage and still shots, any single one person could have quite easily leaned over and just dropped a hand grenade in that car.
Yeah.
Let alone shooting him from a 6'4" bloody book depository.
Yeah. So I think actually what this brings up to me is the contradictory statements of a lot of the people responsible for his security. And sometimes I think it's almost like deliberate, so the Secret Service.
Smoke and mirror.
Yeah, so the Secret Service say, well, we did this, and then, or that was so-and-so's responsibility. And then when you go to the other guy, he says, oh, well, we did this, and that was so-and-so's responsibility. It's like making a phone call to the old social, you'd go around the houses, So, oh, sorry, you need another department. It's a bit like that. It's the same thing going on.
It's a bit like trying to pick up a ticket at Fratton Park as well.
But
anyway,
I think in relation to that, so it's something similar with about who gave the order for there to be no bulletproof top. So, you read one story, well, Kennedy said he didn't want it, and then you read something else. So somebody else said it wasn't going to go on for such and such a reason. So personally, I just think there's a lot of lying that's been going on about that. And of course, with Kennedy being dead, we can't ask him whether he asked for it to be removed.
Well, Jackie said umpteen times that Jack didn't feel comfortable about it being removed, and it may have been that he might have said something along the lines of, and this is just speculation, he might have just said something along the lines of, oh yeah, well, that's a good idea, the people will see me better, but I'm not happy about it, kind of thing. And then somebody just makes that decision. But ultimately, even if he did say, I want it removed, it's not his call. He's the president, but that's still not his call.
Yeah, you're right.
Right? He can be overridden. His call is his chief of security, right?
I think also that top hadn't been, he'd been in Houston, San Antonio the day before. The top hadn't been up then. I just wonder whether that also lulled them into a false sense of security, it not being on previous motorcades. I think also as regards to bulletproof vests, I guess if one person had one on, then they would have had to say, well, if one has it on, then they all have to have them on. One further point on that. So it's often forgotten about, but JFK also had Addison's disease. I don't know a lot about it, but I think he had severe back problems, and he used to wear a brace, apparently, which so I'm not sure, but I've read somewhere that might have inhibited the wearing of a bulletproof vest.
Yeah, that again was stated in the Warren Commission that he was unable to wear a bulletproof vest. Not that it would have made any difference because he was shot in the head, but yeah, at the end of the day, if I'd have been the head of security and somebody said, right, we're having the bulletproof bubble off, I'd be like, No, we're not. Not unless Jack can wear a bulletproof vest. And if he can't wear a bulletproof vest, which he physically can't, he's not having that bubble off. End off. You know.
And then about the running boards, well, I don't know whether you've seen the footage from Love Field, but actually the head of the team in Dallas, it wasn't Rowley. Who was it? I can't remember his name now. Anyway, the Secret Service supervisor in the follow-up car, you can see him on the film. He tells the guy, there were guys stood on the running boards, 1 or 2 guys, he tells them, get off. They just jump off the limousine and they're stuck. They're left there in Love Field. And also, like you say, the motorcyclist should have been alongside the limousine. But for example, in Dealey Plaza, they should have been either side of that limousine. And it looks to me, it's a bit difficult to tell because the Zapruder film has been cut, but they seem to drop off just before the shots. That's my impression. And like you said,
I agree with that.
And like you say, when we were looking at it before, the 2 guys on the left, the 2 cyclists to the left of the limousine at the rear, they seem to be looking directly across at Zapruder, or anyway in Zapruder's direction. They're not looking. They're not looking ahead, and you know, you'd think. I don't know. I've never been a police motorcyclist on a motorcade, but you'd think they'd be kind of looking all around them. But actually, if you look at them, they're just looking directly to the right, right up where Zapruder is.
Well, personally, I'd be thinking, I mean, I know they're wearing helmets and stuff, but I'd be thinking if you hear 3 shots, you're going to be looking in the direction of where you think them shots have come from, right?
Yeah. Yeah, but they were looking in that direction before the fatal headshot.
Yeah, they didn't even flinch. They didn't even flinch. They didn't even move.
Yeah.
They didn't even move. They didn't even move their position in terms of where they were looking.
Yeah.
You know, you think if that was a surprise, the president's just had his head blown off. There's bits of brain and flesh flying everywhere, right? You'd think their gaze would be averted from Mr. Zapruder.
Yeah.
And it would be, you know, down towards the president's head exploding. But it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
At all.
Okay, so we've discussed the limousine. I'm sure there are other things we could have talked about. Like some people have said there could have been a gun under the jump seat, under Connolly's jump seat. So yeah, we've talked about a localized fatal headshot.
Would that have been a Colt 45 under the jump seat?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I personally, logistically, you would think it would be convenient, but I think it would be difficult to pull off myself. And there'd also be the.
Do we know what hardware the CIA were issued with?
Yeah, when you say CIA, Jace, do you mean the Secret Service or the?
Secret Service. Yeah, sorry, my bad. Do we know what hardware they were issued with?
No, I don't know what hardware they had.
No, I don't either. But I wouldn't mind betting it was Colt 45.
And as I said before, I've seen different versions of the Zapruder film, but on one I saw, I think I said to you before, possibly in part 2, if you look at one of them, it looks to me as almost as if Kellerman passes something to Greer in the front seat after the fatal headshot, which makes me think, and both Greer and Kellerman turned their heads. So, which
Mhm.
makes me wonder whether Kellerman did something.
Well, you remember me saying that I watched a documentary that suggested that one of the motorcyclists behind the vehicle, when he heard the first shot that struck the president in the back or the base of the neck, the one where he clutches his chest like that, yeah. That there was in this documentary, it suggested that there was a possibility that one of the cyclists' handgun that had been drawn from a holster actually went off accidentally and delivered that fatal taking her head off. I don't necessarily buy that story too much, because again, that would have been a shot from behind, and it's quite clear that the fatal shot isn't from behind, in my opinion, anyway. So I don't necessarily buy into that. But, again, it's another possibility that was never really explored at the time. There was also, as we've touched on before, that FBI agent that picks up that 45 casing that Sose had blood and hair and bone fragment on it, and just picks it up, puts it in his pocket. Questions would need to be asked. Is he picking up his own discharge? Do you know what I mean? Is he picking that up because he's fired that shot? Loads of questions. Yeah. And that bullet doesn't match the other bullets that were found, or the casings that were found in the book depository. So instantly you've got two gunmen, right? Instantly.
Yeah, just last point on the limousine, or the what was happening around the limousine. So you see that one image of, I think it's George Hickey, and he's got, is it a machine gun or whatever? I only ever saw that after researching the Kennedy assassination after a long time. So you would think that would be a prominent photograph, but you hardly ever see that photograph. So I always wonder about the stuff that you don't see. Why don't you see more of that stuff? So I always wonder about that. You'd think that would be a famous picture, but it isn't.
Because it probably would have been had not been cut out of the film.
Because you cannot see. I've only ever seen that in the one photo. I don't remember ever seeing him holding a gun anywhere in any other photograph, any other bit of film. To me, that's why. Why can't you see it in anything else?
Because they don't want you to see it.
That's right. Anyway, so we also talked about the bullets the last time. So maybe we ought to just talk about those a little bit more, because like Jace talked about the 45 slug that was found on the south side of Elm. But firstly, let's just go back up to the Texas School Book Depository. So Roger Craig also touched on it. He said, I don't know whether he was hinting at something, but he said, I don't know who said shots had come from the Texas School Book Depository, but that's where the police went. So, of course, if they're there, then there are not going to be so many of them down on the grassy knoll. But there were 3 casings, like you said, found on the 6th floor, and they were. I'm not a gunman, so I don't know about these things so much, but I would think if somebody had been firing that Mannlicher Carcano, those casings would not have dropped on the floor perfectly in line and all pointing in the same direction.
No,
they would have been scattered all over the place.
I would have said at least one of them would have gone out of the window personally, but there we go.
So, somebody's placed them there, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And were they were they fingerprinted?
Yeah, that was the other. Yeah, well, we know what that's all about. So
Exactly. The other thing is I mean, somebody must have said the shots came from that window, right? We're talking. There is a window between the first shot and the fatal shot, right? And different accounts of that vary. Max Holland says it's up to 11 seconds. I think the official one is 6 seconds. All right. So you've got a window of 6 to 11 seconds. Let's, for argument's sake, say. Now, have you ever been on the 6th floor of a building? It's funny you should say this, because I was actually on the 7th floor of a building today, and the lift wasn't working. It was an old courthouse that was dilapidated in Camberwell, right? And I had to go down the stairs, and I timed myself, walking casually, as say Lee Harvey Oswald did, right down the stairs. He's supposed to have casually walked past. I think he even stopped off to get a Coke or something on the way, or some bizarreness like that. And I'll tell you what, it took me a lot longer than bloody 11 seconds, that's for sure, right? So what I'm saying is, somebody said instantly the shots were fired from the book depository. So police go to the building. They go inside the building, right? What would you do? What would the first thing you would do? You'd seal that building. Nobody would be going in. Nobody would be coming out, right? Let alone be able to walk casually down 6 flights of stairs, grab a Coke or whatever, right? And then walk out without a bead of sweat on you, maybe?
yeah,
I don't know. He didn't look too flustered when he got arrested, but that was when he got arrested. I mean, that was ages after.
Yeah.
But you think you just fired 3 shots to assassinate the president of the USA, and then you're trying to calmly go down 6 flights of stairs without looking in a bit of a state, right? You'd be thinking, if you're a copper, you're going to that building. If anybody comes past you or comes out of that building looking in a bit of a state, you're going to stop them. But then you should be stopping them anyway, because that building should have been sealed.
Yeah.
Front and back, and every entrance should have been sealed in straight away. It wasn't.
Yeah. So I think, those 3 casings sat equally apart, all facing in the same direction, neatly lined up like they're on a supermarket shelf. I mean, that's like, again, Leslie Nielsen in Naked Gun 2.5, isn't it? So
and the casings were definitely from a Mannlicher, right?
Yeah.
So then somebody suddenly realizes, actually, the rifle they found doesn't match the casings they've dropped on the floor.
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to move on to, because as we were talking about a bit earlier, so there are affidavits from Weitzman and Boone, and Roger Craig talked about this on TV. He was adamant the gun they found was a Mauser. That's the gun that was reported on TV also. Even the CIA said it was a Mauser. It wasn't. They said that the report that a Mannlicher Carcano was the murder weapon was in error. That's on CIA records. Mark Lane. The CIA bit came later, but he was saying all of this in 1964. For God's sake, Mark Lane saying that. He even told Gerald Ford about it. I mean, and Gerald Ford was just making things up. And what did Gerald Ford go on to be? He went on to be the president of the United States after Watergate, which some people think was because of the Kennedy assassination. So anyway, those are the bullets, but the bullets are not finished there, because as we were just talking about as well, on the south side of Elm Street, I'm not sure exactly where it was, but looking at the film, it looks to me around where Babushka Lady would have been, I think. Although if the bullet was found there and it had hair, blood, and bone on it, then you'd imagine it had traveled from the other side, from the north side. Would you say?
Yes. Yeah, and also from the front.
Okay. So, and if it's a 45, I don't know how far 45 can shoot from, but it's a revolver bullet, I guess. And you'd imagine for accuracy's sake, it would have been a close up. And again, I was talking about this before. I think personally that the Bobby Kennedy assassination is a Rosetta Stone to this, in that everybody was kind of looking at Sirhan, while actually the real damage was happening from really close up, which makes me think if that 45 slug was found, it was somebody pretty close who fired that shot. Very localized from, I'm not saying it was, but from with it inside the limousine or very close to the limousine. So if it was inside the limousine, we might consider a gun under the jump seat, the two guys in the front, or the passengers. Or who would have been close on the right side? I think the two cyclists, there were two guys on the right, but that's what I was wondering about, because you were saying Bobby Hargis was suspected by some, but wasn't he on the far left? Although if the film was cut and Max Holland says he thinks there was a space of 11 seconds between the first and final shots, is that what you said? Then that possibly would give him time to move from the left over onto the right. But the thing about that is, I don't know, who were those four cyclists? You know, again, this is something that always makes me get suspicious. For example, the Hickey photo, you don't see so much of that. So you wonder why haven't I seen more of that photo? I know about Bobby Hargis, but I don't know, who were the other three motorcyclists? Do you know their names? I don't know who they are.
No.
Which makes me wonder, makes me suspicious of that. So,
yeah.
And if it was a 45 slug that did the damage, then you got to think that a shot from the grassy knoll was possibly a decoy. Although hang on.
So I'm just going to look something up a minute. Bear with me a second. Carry on talking.
Yeah. So, but that 45 slug is being discounted so easily by the Warren Commission makes you think, well, actually, that was a very important piece of evidence. And as we seen on the photo from Two Men in Dallas, which was a Mark Lane film, there's an FBI guy who picks up that 45 slug and just walks away with it, which is not CSI protocol. And the thing about that as well, you've got to say, if that's an FBI guy, doesn't he have a name? Why don't we know? I'm sure somebody must know, just looking at that photo, who knows who that FBI agent is. He must have a name. And you would think that some of the police officers would have known his name as well. So I don't know whether he would have been an FBI guy from Washington or an FBI guy from the local office. And what happened to that?
Yes, I'm just looking. I was just looking up to see what gun was used to actually kill Lee Harvey Oswald. It was a 38 caliber revolver, but also fired at very close range. I mean, there was no way Lee Harvey Oswald was going to live. That's what I'm saying, right?
Yeah, that's the thing.
A lot of people that get shot in the stomach do manage to survive a gunshot wound to the stomach, right? But I don't know if you've ever seen the autopsy picture of Lee Harvey Oswald. Have you ever seen it?
Yeah, but I've not really scrutinized it.
There's a massive, massive hole where he's shot. I mean, it's massive. I mean, you could quite easily let somebody bleed out from that if you wanted them to die. That's all I'm saying. Right?
Well, I think they did. They did want him. They did want him to die. Yeah.
Well, obviously, yeah, obviously. Yeah.
So, yeah. Also, I just wanted to go back to the Zapruder film and the focus of that. So we were looking at that in part 2. It's probably just incidental, but when I talked about the focus of that film moving away from the limousine to the grass, as it veers away from the limousine, it also crosses the path of Babushka Lady's eye line. It's probably just incidental, nothing of relevance, but I thought I'd just put that in as well. Okay, so, and if also, I did a video as well about the background on that Zapruder film. So it's not only the focus, you talked about the sprocket holes, the windshield, also the line, you talked about a line going across the picture. Also, if you look at the background on that Zapruder film, the facades on the buildings in the background are weird. So, for example, on the right-hand side, you should have the county court building, which did look white, but actually it's just a blank white. That there are no features to tell, no windows or anything to tell you that it's a build or anything. It's just a white being whited out. So some people have suggested the shots came from that county court building. And then if you move across, then you should have Elm Street. So that would have been east. So I think the bit from Houston down to the overpass is west Elm Street, I think, I'm not sure. And then the bit beyond is east Elm Street, I think. The bit that goes along the side of the Daltex building, I think that's East Elm Street. So, but if you look at the Zapruder film, it's very difficult to distinguish that street if you compare it to other pictures. And of course, if you look at other pictures, there are other pictures which show there was that, I'm sure you've seen it, that van, there's a van parked alongside the Daltex building. And I'm not sure, but I think, I might be wrong on this. What was the name on that van? The name of the company painted on that van?
Probably Acme.
It is. I think it's Acme. I might be wrong on that, but I think it is Acme Air Conditioning or something like that. It is. I might be wrong on that.
Which you know it doesn't contain air conditioning, right?
Yeah, and I think I read some guy tried to check out that company, and it was a bit suspect. So
it was Acme was always used in the Roadrunner cartoons, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I was gonna shoehorn in some cartoon references. So Mr. Magoo as well. I'm sure Mr. Magoo had a few Acmes as well.
I just always remember Wile E. Coyote opening a box of Acme Roadrunner Killer.
But I think I might
heavily disguised as bombs, right?
Yeah, so I might be wrong, but in that Zapruder film, I haven't looked at it a lot, but when I looked at it briefly, I don't think that van is in the Zapruder film, and it should be. Or if it is there, it's not as clear as it is in other images. And then also, the Daltex building looks different. So it's not only those things we talked about previously, it's also the background as well. And then other researchers have also talked about, I think you touched on it as well earlier, the scale of the people in it, the scale of the limousine, all those things. They're out of sync. They're out of sync within the picture itself, but they're also out of sync compared to other pictures that were taken.
Yeah. So many inconsistencies, and they wonder why there are conspiracy theorists. I mean, you know, the more muddy a picture is, you know, the more people are going to come up with conspiracy theories. I mean, me personally, I've been accused of being a conspiracy theorist because, well, you know, my thoughts on other things as well. But every one of those things, they're all muddy. Every single one of them muddy. There's nothing that's like crystal clear.
Well, you know, conspiracy theory was an expression coined by the CIA to try and rubbish people who had theories that the CIA conspired on things, which they do day after day, 24 hours a day. They conspire. That's what they do.
Yeah.
They do conspire. It's like if I say, you're a do-gooder, you're doing good. You know, I mean, it's the same thing. So, okay, and also in part 2, we had a brief consideration of the 3 tramps photo. Actually, I think there's more than one photo. I think there are a few of them. I can't remember the name of the guy who took them, but maybe we can look at it again a bit more in this part. So Fletcher Prouty, who I've always wondered about, to be honest, but so he was pretty high up in the Pentagon, and I think, although in the Stone movie, I think the Donald Sutherland character was meant to be fictitious, I think it was based on Fletcher Prouty. So so he looked at that photo, 3 tramp, or as I said, I think there are a few three tramps photos, and he not only questioned the behavior of the so-called 3 tramps and the 2 police officers, he also identified Edward Lansdale as the guy who's walking past them in one of those photos. And Edward Lansdale was his boss, I think, at the Pentagon. Officially, he worked for the US Air Force. So I think he had a desk at the Pentagon in the Air Force Department. But Fletcher Prouty said he was CIA and had always been CIA. And he retired from, officially, he retired from the Air Force on October 31st, I think it was. It could have been the 30th, but I think it was, he retired from the Air Force officially on October 31st, 1963. And there he is, according to Fletcher Prouty, 3 weeks later, walking past those 3 tramps who were found in the railway car, one of who I think is Charles Harrelson. a known assassin, and who, if he was officially in the Air Force, that would have made, I think I'm right in saying, Curtis LeMay his boss. So I think Curtis LeMay was the Air Force Chief of Staff, I think. So I don't know whether you wanted to add anything about those 3 Tramps photos, Jace.
Only that it's well documented that it was all very glossed over, by the Warren Commission, by the FBI. I mean, I'd have had those guys in questioning for probably weeks on end. Not just release them with we'll go about your business then. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
well, I think I don't know. Who do you think they are? I don't believe that those 3 guys that they came up with 30 years later are those guys, to be honest, myself. And of course, if you don't record their names at the time, then it's easy to find somebody 30 years later you can say it was. So I mean, that's what happens when you don't follow protocols.
That's right. Right. And even the pictures at the time, for me, they don't look like tramps.
No, well, that's the thing. Yeah, people have said the one guy at least is clean shaven. He's wearing very nice looking clothes, polished shoes. Who do you think those guys are? Have you thought who they are?
Well, I used to have a theory that they were the gunmen. That was my theory. But I've never been able to sort of come up with anything to back that up. Not anything sort of, in terms of, this happened and that happened, therefore they were there, they were here, that kind of thing. But the first time I ever saw them, I remember thinking they've let at least the person that fired that fatal shot, they've let them go, right? Because I thought the person that fired that fatal shot was one of those 3 guys. Whether they all had a weapon and all fired, I don't know, but I certainly think they were dodgy, very dodgy.
Yeah, I think the middle guy is Charles Harrison.
I'm looking at people now; they're not tramps at all. Yeah. The one has got grass stains on his knees, or what looks like grass stains on his knees. That's the guy wearing the hat. So I'd be saying to myself, why have you got grass stains on your knees? That's what I'd be saying. That's the first thing I'd be asking. I'd be saying, well, why are the other 2 guys dressed so well for tramps?
Yeah, I think that guy's E. Howard Hunt myself. Some people said it's Chauncey Holt, and then I think it's Charles Harrison. I don't know. I'm not sure about the other guy. Some people say that's Charles Rogers, although when I've looked at other photos of him, I haven't been able to see anything that makes me think it is him. Although
But the first photo that was released looks nothing like the later photos, does it? The guys don't look anything like.
Yeah.
Later photos, they don't look anything like the guys.
What you mean about the photos that were produced 30 years later? Say it was these guys, I think. Yeah, I mean, well, that's what happens when you don't record everything at the time. So I think the guy they say it was, Charles Rogers, that apparently, I can't corroborate it, but apparently he murdered his parents. They were found in a deep freeze or something a long time after they were killed. And he arrived in Australia. He went to Australia. Yeah, just getting back to the photos, I forgot one other thing. So also Ike Alkins. So I think he was pretty close there to what happened, and I think he was a lone gunman supporter.
Yeah.
And as I said, I think Jim Garrison also subpoenaed him to appear at the Clay Shaw trial, but he wouldn't go. And he took that photo of the lead car. But if something had happened on the north side of the Limousine, then I think he would have been well positioned to see what had happened. And I just wonder, and he died in the 1990s at home with his wife in their home of supposed carbon monoxide poisoning. But that was the time of the ARRB. I just wonder whether he had seen something and just didn't want to, considering how many people died in relation to the assassination. I just think he just kept his mouth shut. I just wonder if that's the case.
Yeah, it does make you wonder.
Although you could also,
there's an awful lot. There's an awful lot of suspicious deaths.
Yeah.
It's countless suspicious deaths. You know, not even people dying of old age and stuff. It's just suspicious deaths.
Yeah.
Relating to people that have spoken out or have had something to say about it.
Yeah, a lot of suspicious deaths, and also a lot of people with connections to Jack Ruby. So, for example, Beverly Oliver, I think she worked in a carousel club. So, and her husband was a mafioso. So, yeah, you know, I guess also Algans, I'm not saying he did it, but he's also a suspect.
Yeah.
Yeah, and one more thing. So we've been talking about the train passing over going over the overpass, and I could have sworn I'd seen pictures and film of that going back a long time, but I was looking for it over the last week, and I couldn't find anything to see it. So, are you absolutely sure there was, Jace, or is that up in the air?
I'm as sure as I can be that I've seen that, but I cannot find it now.
Yeah, I could have sworn I'd seen something, but then I've been looking for it again and I can't find it. So perhaps we have to put a question mark over that.
Maybe. Yeah, I'm just looking at stuff.
Yeah, one more thing. Philip Willis, he was another one of the photographers, eyewitness and photographer. Officially, he took 12 photos. He was a retired Air Force major. When he appeared in front of the Warren Commission, he said he was a real estate broker, but on the day of the assassination, actually, he was working for Downtown Lincoln, which is a name I've heard before in connection with the assassination. So I think Downtown Lincoln was also where a suspect, Jack Lawrence, worked. So you have to wonder as well whether some of those people taking photos, taking movies were actually plants, and whether they weren't just your ordinary run-of-the-mill onlookers. Some of them actually were there, had other agendas.
Yeah, well, I said that to you before.
Yeah,
you know, just because they're there doesn't mean that they're there, if that makes any sense. It's a bit like you said earlier about all of the news channels said it was a Mauser. Well, that's kind of irrelevant because they would have been told told it was a Mauser, they're only going to report what they're told. And if if they were told to say it was a Mauser, then they're going to say it was a Mauser. Do you know what I mean? It's a bit like I just think the whole Zapruder thing is just questionable. It's just questionable. Why we're going over old ground a little bit, but why was he allowed to stand on a plinth? Why was he allowed to gain an advantage?
Yeah.
Even basic things. And I know it's easy to say that a lot of things they might have learnt lessons post that assassination, but now if you go anywhere to see anybody famous, doesn't make that, I'm not even talking about the level of a president, but anybody remotely famous, if you go anywhere and you stand up to get a vantage point, you've got security saying get down, right? Straight away, get down, because they need to see everybody on the same level. And again, like you said earlier about the white, the van with Acme on it, what the hell are the Secret Service doing allowing a van to be parked up randomly when the president's going by? I mean, that certainly wouldn't happen today, and you could argue that it wouldn't happen today because of the amount of terrorist bombs that have gone off in vans and all the rest of it that you've learned lessons from, and all that kind of stuff. But it's like, why would you even ignore that kind of stuff? I'd have been all over it. I would have been all over it.
The other thing about that, the film footage. So the day before, again, I can't remember whether it was Houston or San Antonio, but they might have been in both cities the day before. But in the follow-up car, presumably it's a Secret Service man. I don't know. It could be an official photographer or cameraman. I'm not sure, but I think it's a Secret Service man. You can see a picture, and the guy, he's filming the limousine from the follow-up car. He's filming it.
Yeah, but so where's the film?
Yeah, but that's from the day before. That's from the day before. But if they were doing that the day before, why weren't they doing that on the day of the assassination? Why were they doing that the day before and not on the second day? What was the purpose of that film?
So this is another thing I was going to ask you, because when I was watching that Max Holland documentary earlier, the day before, as you said, they did a rehearsal, right? They did a rehearsal of the motorcade, right? And they filmed, believe it or not, from the school book depository. It's like, if you're up there the day before filming from the school book depository, and and even showed the CIA, the Secret Service footage that they filmed the day before from the book depository, right? And all of that, and that's when he was pointing out that the traffic light was in the way and blah blah blah. Whether they filmed it from the 6th floor or even from the same window, it's neither here nor there. But they filmed it from upper level on the book depository, right? So that they could. They called it an official training video, right? What? Who were they training, and what were they training them to do?
You got to wonder whether they were already preparing the film that they were gonna produce, and also whether they were working out angles for the shots.
Yeah, and again, we were talking about at the start of this particular one, we were talking about the car itself, the limo itself.
Yeah,
I don't know if you've ever noticed, but there were shots. When I say shots, photographs of the limo. When it arrived at Parkland, and there was blood and matter, and there was a screwed up tissue, I think that Jackie had done on the seat, right? And then you look at another shot taken that shows Jackie's Jackie's bouquet on the seat, right? that bouquet isn't on the seat in the previous shot. And when you got the shot of the bouquet, there's no blood matter, there's no whatever. But I also think, and I don't know whether you can back me up on this, but you'll need to go away and look at the photographs. I think those photographs are of two totally different vehicles, right? But they say, you look at them all online, all on the internet. They say that's the limo, and I'm like, no, it ain't.
Yeah, I'll have to have a look at that. That's not something I know anything about, but I'll have to have a look at it. Okay.
I mean, the one with the seat that's got the blood matter and stuff has got some piping around the back of the seat. I don't know whether it's cream or white, but there's definite piping. The other picture, there's no piping. It's like, hang on a minute, what's going on? Have you changed the seats?
Yeah, I'll have to have a look at that. That's why this is called the JFK Assassination Audit. So
I know. And the other thing is that there is a shot of the limo, so say outside Parkland, with the hard top on it. Right now, I used to have a hard top on a Triumph Spitfire, which is by no means, well, you remember my little red Triumph Spitfire, right?
Yeah.
And the hard top that I used to have for that, right? By no means is that hard top anywhere near the size of a hard top for a Lincoln Continental, I'm telling you, right? I had trouble storing that hard top for the Spitfire myself, right? I used to have trouble lifting it myself. And I reckon you could probably multiply that by 6 easy for a Lincoln. It's like, where the hell was that hard top? Where was it for it to suddenly appear at Parkland? Was it in the back of the Acme truck? All that kind of stuff. Where was that bloody hard top?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that wasn't even the glass bubble. The glass bubble was elsewhere.
Yeah.
I think it was still on the plane, I think.
Yeah.
At Love Field.
Yeah, that's a good question. How did that hard top get there? Was it in the follow-up car? But then, as you said, I mean, where would you store it?
Exactly. Where was it? When did it arrive? Who brought it there? Or they just rock up with a different bloody car. Do you know what I mean?
That's right, yeah.
Just quickly change the plates for a bit of convenience,
Okay, so we kind of covered, I think, most of the stuff I wanted to cover from part 2 that we possibly didn't say enough about. Unless, Jace, there's anything else you wanted to add?
I don't think so. Only that obviously, we are talking at the moment. It's still in UK time. It is 11:20 on the 22nd of November at the moment.
Yeah.
I think it's quite poignant that we just acknowledge that. What time is it with you?
Yeah, well, we're into the 23rd here, so it's 8:20 in the morning where I am.
Yeah. So you can see how the actual death of the president was reported in New Zealand before he'd actually died. Just saying.
Yeah, that's another aspect. I think that's something circumstantial that we'll look at down the road, which is a very long one, to be honest. So,
indeed.
Okay, so Jace, I hadn't mentioned it before, but I think we also have to consider, even though there doesn't seem to be a lot of it, the audio evidence. So I don't think the Warren Commission listened to any, I might be wrong, but I don't think they considered audio evidence. But in the 70s, the HSCA, I can't remember what that stands for. Was it the House, Senate? I can't remember what it was. Anyway, whatever the HSCA stands for, I mean, they looked at the audio evidence or listened to it in the 70s, and they concluded, they got experts in, I think they concluded that there were shots from the grassy knoll. So I don't know a lot about that audio evidence. but I don't. So there's not a lot I can add to that. But that's what they concluded. The audio evidence suggested there was a shot from, at least one shot from the grass. I think they actually said there might have been 2 shots that happened simultaneously or very close together. Do you know anything more about that?
When you say the HASC, is that the House Armed Services Committee?
HSCA.
HSCA.
Yeah.
That's the select committee, isn't it?
Yeah, but like it was in the Senate, yeah, the American Senate, I think.
So yeah, the United States House Select Committee on Assassinations.
Yeah, that's it. That's the one.
All right.
Yeah.
You know who was on that committee, don't you?
Remind me.
Gerald Ford.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he's a common theme, isn't he, throughout this, from the start, from the Warren Commission. And he was an FBI, he reported to the FBI. He's also the guy, so he's the guy, so Mark Lane presented the evidence of a Mauser to Gerald Ford, and then Gerald Ford started saying that Weitzman or the police officers had thought it might have been a Mauser. He started changing the narrative that they thought it might have been a Mauser. So he started raising questions about whether in fact it was a Mauser. But he's also the guy who changed the location of the back wound. So he moved. Yeah. So it's like you wouldn't believe it, but instead of using autopsy photos for the wound, the Warren Commission used drawings. And not only did they use drawings, Gerald Ford got them to change where the back wound was.
Yep.
So this guy, he pops up a lot in this investigation, and he was leaking information to the FBI. Alan Dulles, of course, was leaking information to the CIA. And who should take over from Nixon after the Watergate scandal, which a lot of people think had a relationship with the Kennedy assassination? Who should become president? Gerald Ford. And what did he do when he became president? He pardoned Nixon.
Yeah.
Not forgetting, Nixon was in Dallas on the day of the assassination. Some people say he had been at the Murchison house, I think it is, the night before. I don't know about that myself, but some people say he was. And he was also, he had been, I think, in charge of, is it called Operation 40, which was like an assassination program with a lot of assassins on it.
Yeah, I must do a self audit actually. Gerald wasn't on the HSCA; he was on the Warren Commission.
Okay, yeah, he was on the Warren Commission. Okay, so he wasn't on the HSCA then.
Yeah. Along with Alan Dulles, yeah. So you're right. I mean, they did conclude that it was there was shots were fired from the grassy knoll, but again, disregarded, isn't it? It's all disregarded.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Like you say, all the audio stuff from back then. I mean, it is pretty dodgy.
Yeah.
But yeah, the audio stuff I've heard, but you can never tell whether it's been doctored or not. But as far as I can see it and hear it, I've always heard 4 shots. I've always heard 4 shots, and it's not because I want to hear 4 shots. I hear 4 shots.
Yeah.
but people have argued that one is a ricochet or a what's the
Echo.
word I'm looking for?
Echo.
That's it. Yeah. But then if one echoes, why aren't all four of them echoing? I would say if one echoes, it's going to be fired from somewhere like an underpass where there's an echo chamber, right?
Yeah, or a different place from the other shots.
Different place, exactly. Otherwise, you'd get four echoes, would you not?
Yeah, a different place and a different weapon.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to, we've talked about, I'm sure we've missed some evidence, I'm sure, but let's move on to witnesses, Jace. As we said, everybody in Dealey Plaza that day is a suspect, but they are also witnesses, although some had a better view of what happened than others, and some are more legit than others. I as we mentioned earlier, I'm not convinced everybody in Dealey Plaza that day was an innocent onlooker. Obviously, the shooter wasn't, but I don't think it was just the shooter or shooters. I think this was a big operation, and a lot of people, especially in the area around Limousine, I think they were fulfilling extra-curricular duties. So, so are there any testimonies that resonate with you, that stick out?
So there's the testimony, I was talking about it earlier before we went on air, about the guy that was doing that documentary, and he got a testimony from another girl that had taken a video, and basically he compared her video with Zapruder's.
Yeah.
And she made a statement, because he'd done a reconstruction. He'd done a whole reconstruction of the limo, people in the limo, the outriders, everything. He'd done a whole reconstruction, sealed off Dealey Plaza and did it. And she was there observing this, witnessing it. And she said the limo's in the wrong place. And he'd done the reconstruction from the Zapruder film.
Yeah.
And all the evidence that he gathered from the Zapruder film. And he said, "What do you mean the limo's in the wrong place?" And she was filming from the other side. So as the limo turned onto Elm Street, she was on the opposite side of the grassy knoll.
Yeah.
She was with her dad and she was filming. And she said, "Oh, the limo's in the wrong place." And he said, "How can you be so sure? All this time has passed." And she said, "Well, look at my film and you'll see from my film the limo's in the wrong place." And he said, "In what respect?" She said, "It needs to be closer to me." Right. And he said to her, "Well, your perception could have changed because you were a child at the time and all this." And she said, "No." She said, "Look at my film." She said, "Just look at my film." So he looks at the film, and sure enough, the film backed up what she was saying.
Yeah. That
the limo was closer to the curb side of the grassy knoll.
Yeah.
Than what it should have been, right? In terms of her video. So he said, well, instantly you've got a discrepancy there between the Zapruder film and her film. Although he did say that coincidentally, inverted commas, at the time of her film, from start to finish, was the time of the missing segment, or I say missing segment, or the time that Zapruder was not filming.
Yeah.
Exactly. To the second, right?
Yeah.
Now, the only way that could possibly be, a coincidence is like a million to one chance.
Yeah.
Right. So for it to be a missing chunk to the exact second of her piece of film, I would say that chunks had to have been removed from the Zapruder film. That's what I would say, anyway.
Yeah.
And And anyway, for argument's sake, let's say it hasn't, and Zapruder did stop filming, blah, blah, blah. So you piece the two together, and the limousine literally jumps 2 feet. It literally jumps 2 feet sideways, which is crap. So her testimony, she wasn't even called as a witness because she was a child.
Yeah.
So her statement has never ever been an official statement. Never, not once.
Yeah. I think also, if the Zapruder film was altered, we think it was, then, and because he did see it, he didn't sell it until the Saturday, then, and I've also mentioned Orville Nix. He felt his film, he'd handed in his film, or he'd had it confiscated, I can't remember. And then they returned the film to him, but Orville Nix felt his film had been altered. And if the Zapruder film has been altered to the extent that we think it has, then he must have known it had been altered.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to be fair, when that film was first shown to the public, it didn't show the fatal shot, right?
Yeah.
But that film was said to the public, this is the film, this is the footage, right? This is it, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't until the Garrison case in '68 that was seen for the first time. And it wasn't actually put on general release for the public to see until the mid '70s. Yeah.
Which is why they had a review in the '70s. I think the church committee, I think, was that '75, immediately after the general release. And then I think I'm right in saying maybe that was separate from the HSCA. I might be wrong on that one.
It was.
So
it was. You're right. It was.
So
75, yeah. So what I'm saying is, the initial sort of thing they say to you at the beginning was, this is the film. This is the film, right? Yeah. And then there's more of it emerges in 1968, thanks to Jim Garrison, right? Yeah. And then, and again, Jim Garrison, a lot of people have got their opinions on Jim Garrison, but that's neither here nor there. The fact is, he did uncover, I think he subpoenaed Life magazine, wasn't it? I think to get the full version of that film. Yeah. And dared to show it in a court. Yeah. Whatever you think about, whatever anybody thinks about Jim Garrison, he's the only person to have actually done that. Yeah. Right. And raised more questions than there are answered. But and then you've got the whole thing in the '70s where more people then see it, so therefore they have another couple of commissions to try and get to the bottom of it and all the rest of it. But I think the reason that they hid that from the public was not because of the graphic content, was because it clearly shows that a fatal shot came from another direction. Yeah. Excuse me. And if the segment that they've cut out is the exact time that girl was filming hers, it throws a whole different slant on the investigation. As what's his name? What was his name again? The journalist I was talking to. Max Holland. Yeah, Max Holland. Yeah. So as he rightly points out, if that limo at the time of the first shot is where she says it is, and not where the Zapruder film says it is, then there is no way the fatal shot could have come from the book depository, because the bloody traffic light was in the trajectory. It was right in the way of the window. Yeah. Just on that point about how near the curb the limousine was, because I think we talked about it earlier in part 1 or 2 or both. So some people say
it stopped and veered to the left. But you're saying that this little girl's video shows it parked or stopping near to the right curb. Is that right?
Well, no, it almost reverses the theory of it veering to the left. It's like it moves over to the right.
So
towards.
So I think if that veered over to the right, I'm guessing, I'm talking blind, but I'm guessing that would have brought it very near to that drain, that gutter.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if it was very near, and then somebody, I think you could get a foot, that would be like, again, the Rosetta Stone thing with Thane Caesar doing Bobby Kennedy, you know, a very close headshot from the gutter with the 45 slug arriving on the south side of Elm. I'm not saying that's what happened, that's just a theory.
Yeah, well, yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about, you know, close range gunfire, you only got to look at, you know, like you say, what happened to Robert Kennedy and also what happened to Lee Harvey Oswald himself.
Yeah,
those were really close. I mean, Lee Harvey Oswald, the gun was right up into his stomach.
Yeah.
Right, and you can see the look of pain on his face when the gun goes off.
Yeah.
In fact, he lets out an audible oof kind of thing.
Yeah.
As he gets hit. Yeah, when you're struck at close range with a 38 or a 45, that does more internal damage than a shot from a long way off. Yeah,
they're all the same. That's all the same modus operandi, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Okay, so
same with Mark Chapman on John Lennon.
All right, it was close. I don't know much about that murder, to be honest.
Yeah, it was as close as Jack Ruby to Lee Harvey Oswald.
You do know as well that he wasn't the flavor of the day with the FBI and CIA, don't you, John Lennon?
Yeah, because he was touting for peace.
Yeah. Okay, so we were looking at the Roger Craig, or some of the Roger Craig appearance on TV that Mark Lane showed in Two Men in Dallas. And so Roger Craig was a county sheriff. So I'm not an expert on American law enforcement, but I think I'm right in saying that there's the city police, and then you have the county sheriff. So I think I'm right in saying the city police look after affairs within the city jurisdiction, and the county the sheriffs look after what's going on in the county. Is that right, Jace?
Yeah.
Which of course is a wider area, but I guess there must be quite a lot of overlap in that.
Oh yeah, tremendous amount. Yeah.
So as we alluded to previously as well, so the grassy knoll and the area behind the picket fence, I think I'm right in saying, was the county sheriff's car parking lot. And correct. Their office, the station, the sheriff's, I don't know what you call it, the office or whatever, was actually in the same building as the court, I believe.
Precinct, was it? Precinct?
Precinct, okay, on the corner of Main and Houston.
I think there were, if I'm right saying so without looking at it, I think there were a whole row of various different types of law buildings along that route.
Yeah. And as I said, the Daltex in which Zapruder had his office and the Texas School Book Depository those still buildings have connections with the intelligence services. I think there was one company, apparently was a CIA front company. So anyway, Bill Decker was the sheriff. So Bill Decker was the sheriff. And I've read, I don't know whether it's true that a lot of those sheriffs had Ku Klux Klan or Minutemen or John Birch Society links. They were also in in a militia or 166. But on the day of that assassination, and I think it was Jesse Curry, he had assured, before Kennedy arrived in Dallas, he had assured the Kennedy entourage that security would be top notch. Bill Decker told his sheriffs they were not to take part in the security operation of the Kennedy visit. So they all lined up. They all lined up in front of the precinct or the office or whatever you want to call it, the sheriff's building, and just watched it pass them on the corner of Main and Houston. So I think that must have been where Roger Craig was standing too. And where was Bill Decker? He was in the motorcade. So actually he was sat in the motorcade. So I can't remember, was he in I think he might have been in the pilot car or the lead car. I've got a feeling he was in the pilot car. So the limousine was not actually the first car in the motorcade. There were two cars in front of it. There was the pilot car, which I believe was maybe a good mile ahead. And then just in front of the limousine was the lead car, which I think Jesse Curry was driving possibly. And that lead car was just in front, possibly 50 meters ahead of the limousine. And you can see that picture in the Outguns photo that we looked at before. So
but those two lead cars, they would have been the ones that determined the speed of the motorcade.
Yeah.
So if they braked to slow it down at the crucial point, then they've got to be suspects as well, right? Yeah.
Well, I think there was a picture somewhere of the lead car with the brake light on around in the vicinity of the overpass.
Yeah.
So anyway, all those sheriffs say that they heard one shot and then two shots together. They all said the same thing, apparently. I'm not sure, though. I'm not sure if that's exactly what Roger Craig said, but and then Roger Craig said he heard the shots and he started running to the grassy knoll in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are there any other witnesses you can think of, Jace?
Yeah, I'm not very good at remembering their names, but I know somebody came forward as a witness to say they'd seen a flash from behind the picket fence.
Yeah.
Which coincided with a gunshot.
Yeah.
But then another witness also said that they saw a flash from behind the picket fence and it was sunlight reflecting off a police officer's badge.
Yeah. I think also on the witnesses, so if you're taking statements from witnesses, I'm not a policeman, but I think your job is to listen to what they say, try to get as much information out of them as you can, corroborate stuff as best as you can, and then take it from there. But with a lot of these statements, witnesses were being pressurized into following a narrative. That is not, again, that is not what they should be doing.
Well, yeah, and there was somebody said, there was one statement, wasn't there? She said, I heard 4, maybe 5 shots. And he said, no, you did not. You heard 3.
Yeah, that's right.
And she said, no, I definitely heard 4. No, you heard 3.
Yeah, I think there was another statement as well where they, one guy, I can't remember his name, I might be able to produce it in a minute. So one guy described a guy with a tan jacket and horn rim glasses in the Texas School Book Depository on the 6th floor. And the guy, I don't know whether it was the police or the FBI, told him if it wasn't Oswald, you didn't see him.
That's right. Yeah.
I think there's an L.C. Smith ran to Elm Street. A woman told him a shot had come from the picket fence. A.D. McCurley ran to the railroad area, jumped the fence, and a railroad worker told him that he had seen gun smoke from the corner of the fence, I think. So there were lots of witnesses who said that, but a lot of witnesses, they were ignored. They had their statements changed. They had statements attributed to them that they hadn't made. They were intimidated, and as we've also discussed, a lot of them died in suspicious circumstances. I think a lot of them were murdered, and we can discuss that another time as well. Jack Faulkner, he ran to Elm Street, where a woman told him that the shots came from the concrete monument, which I'm a bit skeptical about myself, Jace. I think they're talking about the pergola. What do you think about the possibility of shots coming from there?
I'm not. I've never been so sure about that, to be honest. I've never been really convinced about that, the pergola. I've been more sort of inclined to believe the majority of people that said they heard something from behind the picket fence rather than the pergola itself. Yeah.
Luke Mooney, he ran to the picket fence.
Who was the guy? I can't remember his name. Who was the guy that said he heard a shot whistle past his ear? Who was that?
Yeah, that was that Roland? Was it Arnold Roland? I can't remember. I think he's the guy that said he had a video camera that was taken from him by 2 policemen, or 2 guys in police uniforms, he said, were there and had been stood behind him.
Yeah. And he never got it back.
Yeah, I'm a bit skeptical about that one myself. I'm not saying it's untrue, but I'm not convinced by it, to be honest. Eugene Boone, he ran to the grassy knoll and wall at the railroad area. So I think Eugene Boone is the guy. That must be the same guy who found the Mauser.
How did he get up there so quick after running up the grassy knoll?
Yeah, but I think the Mauser was found at 1:22, so that's 50 minutes later. JL Oxford. What is it with all these initials? LHO, JL. JL Oxford jumped the fence where a man told him that he had seen smoke coming.
Yeah.
John Wiseman and Alan Sweat ran to Houston and Elm, where a man told them that the shots came from the Texas School Book Depository. So we have different accounts. Ron
Yeah,
Boone,
and
Ron Boone. I don't know whether he's any relation to Eugene. So Ron Boone ran immediately behind the fence because several people said the shots came from there. Seymour Weitzman as well. So I think a lot of those guys I just mentioned were actually police officers or sheriffs.
so if we believe what the Warren Commission concluded, which there were 3 shots fired, right?
Yeah.
All 3 of those shots hit their target.
Yeah.
Right. In the same Warren Commission report, I can't remember his name, but there was a guy who he was on the grassy knoll, and basically he ran after the motorcade and stopped when he got to the underpass.
Yeah.
Because the cars had sped off by then, right?
Yeah.
And when he emerged from the underpass, a policeman stopped him and said, "You've got blood on your face."
Yeah.
And he put his hand up, and he was bleeding himself. It wasn't JFK's blood; it was his own blood, right?
Yeah.
And basically, the Warren Commission concluded that that was caused by a fragment of concrete that had been chipped by one of the bullets, right?
Yeah.
So they concluded that, but in doing that, they are actually saying that there was a 4th shot, because none of the other 3 bullets that they say are the definitive 3 shots.
Yeah.
None of those hit concrete, right?
Yeah.
They all hit the vehicle, or people
Yeah.
in the vehicle, right?
Yeah. But the problem.
So they're just talking out their arse.
Yeah, well, that's the problem, though. With the Warren Commission, there was no defense, so it was just like a prosecution trying the case itself. There was no defense to retort. So,
Right.
So that's what it was all about. I mean, it's like if you watch the film in JFK, the Stone movie, and Kevin Costner is reading through the Warren report, and you see him, he's going, ask the question. So you're presented with a piece of evidence or testimony, and then you should have the follow-up question. The follow-up question doesn't happen. They just move on to something else, which was the reason, which was what it was all about.
Yeah. Cover up.
Yeah. So I think also one witness said that they saw the gun being passed through the trees, but I'm not sure exactly what they meant on that one. So that's the other thing about, if there was a gun on the grassy knoll, although we talked about this before, I think the drain would have been the best place, or to hide, both to conceal yourself and to get away if it was big enough. But if there was a shot from the grassy knoll, then how did they get rid of the gun?
Yeah. Well, maybe it was the guy that we mentioned earlier, Eugene, when he ran up to the knoll to get the gun and then take it into the bloody book depository 15 minutes later when he conveniently finds it, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but there were a lot of cars parked there. I mean, did they check those cars? I don't remember seeing anything about any of those cars being checked. You know, I mean,
No.
couldn't the gun have been?
There was another statement. Somebody said they saw somebody loading a rifle into the boot of one of those cars in that car park.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, if those cars weren't checked, then you could just put it in the car. And how about the assassin could even have been in one of those cars if the cars weren't checked? The assassin could have just hidden in the car.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Jeez. It's not until you start sort of really looking into it that you realize just how many discrepancies there are. And it's not because we're looking for them, it's because they're there, right? Those discrepancies are there, you know.
Yeah, just having this discussion with you, it's just, I mean, and I've looked at this for years now, to be honest, but just having this discussion with you, I've started asking questions and considering things that I hadn't done before.
Yeah, well, likewise. Yeah, likewise. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's just all. I think the more I look at it and the more I look into it, the more disheartened I feel.
Yeah.
You know, by the whole system and how a nation such as America, or any nation for that matter, can be. This was a favourite term of my granddad's. This is his first mention tonight. This was a favourite term of his. How they could be hoodwinked so much, right?
But I don't think it's just in America. I think it's the international community. I mean, you know,
that's what I said.
In the British mainstream press, they still refer to the Warren Commission as the official account of what happened, even though we've since then had the Church Committee, the HSCA, and the ARRB, which have, in some respects, discredited at least part of what the Warren Commission said. Yeah, so actually Seymour Weitzman, he's the guy who identified the Mauser. So he said that somebody had told him at the picket fence that they'd seen the gun being tossed through the trees. So so, you know, you wonder whether it could have been tossed to one of those police officers in front of the picket fence.
Yeah.
And I think there was also a guy who was supposed to be an FBI agent actually stood on the knoll. I'm not sure exactly about the timeline for that, whether he was there prior to the shooting or he arrived after. I think some people identified him as Regis, was it Regis Kennedy? And he had a gun under his coat.
What, and his surname was Kennedy?
Yeah, I think, yeah, was it Kennedy? I'm not sure about that. I think it was Regis something or other. I think it was Kennedy. He had the same name, I think.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is quite sort of, like I say, it's quite disheartening, really. Quite disheartening. I mean, obviously, you know, JFK was way before my birth. Way before, it was 4 years before. But I do remember, you know, one of my sort of earliest, earliest memories at school, actually, I suppose, was talking about John F. Kennedy. And they sort of like touched on the fact that he was assassinated. And then from then on, I was kind of fascinated about, you know, what it was all about. And it, you know, and everybody says, don't they? Everybody that was alive at the time, they all say they know exactly where they were when they heard that Kennedy was shot. And I suppose in a way, for our generation, it's everybody knows exactly where they were when they heard about the Twin Towers and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But and Diana as well. You know, everybody remembers exactly where they were when they heard about Diana. But it's
Can
I
you,
just think it's a real sad.
yeah.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah, can you believe I was living in London when Diana died and the cortege passed the end of my road? Yeah.
Jeez, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so just going back to Roger Craig, so he's a controversial character. So, but as Mark Lane showed, the affidavits from Weitzman and Boone vindicated his report that a Mauser was the first gun found, but and he was sacked from the sheriff's office. Bill Decker. So Roger Craig said that because he became a bit of a personality celebrity, so a lot of researchers and media people started coming to the office to talk to him, and he was pretty accommodating by the sounds of it. And Bill Decker, he was the sheriff. He's the guy that told the sheriffs not to, the deputy sheriffs not to get involved with the security operation. He'd sat in on the motorcade, and Roger Craig said that Bill Decker told him to tell whoever was asking him about the assassination that he'd seen nothing and heard nothing. That's what Bill Decker told him. But Roger Craig said that in the follow-up, so in the aftermath of the assassination, the limousine had disappeared and gone to Parkland. He'd seen somebody who he didn't know at the time it was Oswald, but later when he saw him at the office at the police station, he saw who he says was Oswald, Lee Harvey Oswald, running down the Knoll and jumping into the Nash Rambler station wagon. Some people have said that
was it his gun?
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, we had all these reports of Oswald doubles. So that's one of the great mysteries about this. Who was Lee Harvey Oswald?
Yeah, I mean, he was a bit of an enigma, wasn't he? But if you trace his history, if you believe that Lee Harvey Oswald was one person,
yeah,
then I actually believe he was a spy. I believe he was a spy working for America, which is why he went to the Soviet Union and so say defected from America. And I just think from that minute on, he felt he was on some kind of mission, right? A covert mission, whatever you want to call it. I think he felt he was genuinely on a mission to gather as much information about like the U2s and all this kind of stuff. And in order to, completely sort of cement his identity with the Russians, he married a Russian. And then I think when because he said he denounced he was being an American citizen and he wanted to remain in the Soviet Union, blah, blah, referred to himself as a Marxist-Leninist, whatever that means. And I think he left the Soviet Union to come back to America because he was told that his mission was over, right? You don't just do all that and then you suddenly have a change of heart and say, oh, I want to go back to America. And then just expect Russia to let you go, especially those, the time of that time in history. So I think he was completely and utterly manipulated by whoever, whether it be the government, the mafia, the CIA, all of them, maybe the FBI rolled into that as well. I think he was constructed. I think he was constructed to be exactly what he said he was, which was a patsy.
Yeah.
All right. And I think once he realized that he was being set up as that, I think that's when he panicked and went and did the whole JD Tippett thing and hid in the theatre. I think he panicked. And I think that, he was quoted as saying, "This is it. It's all over now." I think he realised that he was being set up, but I still don't think he realised at that point what it was he was being set up for.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it probably was beginning to materialize at that point, maybe, possibly. But, I mean, that's the other thing. This is it. Did he really say that? We've only got the policeman's word for
that's
it.
Right. Yeah. Did he really say that? Yeah, did he really say that?
The other thing,
all we know what he definitely said was what we saw him say on film, which is, I don't know what I'm being accused of. I haven't been told what I've been accused of. He had a black eye, so he's obviously had a fault when he went off one of the coppers. Yeah, and in all of those shots I've seen of him, nothing suggests to me that he's not telling the truth. Nothing, none of his body language or anything. He just, to me, he looks genuinely like, I haven't got a fucking clue what's going on.
Yeah.
Excuse the expression.
Yeah, I tend to believe he was being truthful when he said he didn't know what was going on, although I don't think he was that as naive as we might believe. But just what, I've lost my train of thought now. So what was I going to say? So yeah, what about, so also Helen Forrest, so she supported Roger Craig. She said she saw somebody who looked like Oswald coming down the Knoll from the Texas School Book Depository. But one thing I thought of is kind of a bit far-fetched possibly, but what if there was a shooter behind the picket fence, and that shooter was Lee Harvey Oswald, and that the guy in the book depository wasn't Lee Harvey Oswald? As I said, it's a bit far-fetched. And in fact, the guy who shot Kennedy was indeed Lee Harvey Oswald, but the Lee Harvey Oswald who was presented to us, but not the Lee Harvey Oswald that was presented to us.
Well, this is the thing. And I don't, my gut feeling is, I don't think he actually fired a shot of any kind on that day. I think he was placed. I think he was, conveniently placed working at that book depository. There was all those links to him, or maybe not him, if you know what I mean, in New Orleans with Guy Bannister and all of that lot. I just think it was all very much constructed, and I think he was a placement. I think he was a placement, and I think he was always going to be the person that assassinated JFK. But I don't think it was his choice. I don't think it was his decision. I think that fate for him was already decided. And once Jack Ruby fired that fatal bullet into his stomach, that fate was sealed, right? Because there was no way he was ever going to be allowed to testify or cast any kind of doubt on his guilt, or even name drop people that put him in that position, right? There's no way he was ever going to be able to testify to that effect. It was never going to be allowed. And I think that in itself, you know, Jack Ruby, in many ways, is as guilty of the assassination of JFK as anybody, because he, in killing Oswald, he put a lid on the whole thing. Absolutely put a lid on the whole thing.
Yeah.
And
Well,
you know, I have even wondered in the past whether Jack Ruby was the guy that actually fired the fatal shot on Kennedy. You know.
Yeah.
Because he had far more motive than Lee Harvey Oswald in many ways. Almost like the perfect crime, really, isn't it? It's like, if you know that you're going to be the martyr to the cause and you've assassinated your president,
yeah,
and you know that somebody else is being fitted up for the job,
yeah,
and you don't want them to testify or whatever, you're going to shut them up.
Yeah.
But you're already resigned to the fact that you've killed the president, and if the person that's being lined up for it manages to testify, the chances are you are going to be found out as the person that does it, because there's going to be an investigation and all that kind of stuff. So you're resigned to that. So what do you do? Right, well, I'm going to go and shut him up. I'll go and I'll spend the rest of my life in jail, but I'll be actually treated pretty well. I'm not going to face a death penalty. You know, like, if Lee Harvey Oswald had gone to trial, he would have gone to the electric chair. I've got absolutely no doubt about that at all. But that was never going to happen to Jack Ruby, because although he was incarcerated for life, he was almost treated as a national hero, which is wrong, isn't it? It's wrong. I mean, he had more privileges. Jack Ruby had more privileges in prison than anybody else, and arguably than when he was actually free.
Yeah, just getting back to that guy, I think it's Mr. Carr. I can't remember his first name, but so he was on the 7th floor of the court. I think it was the county court building on Houston, and he reported to 2 FBI agents that he heard 4 shots, and he'd seen the guy with the horn ring, a heavy-set man with horn ring glasses, wearing a tan jacket on the 6th floor. And that he'd seen the guy emerge from the school book depository and get into a gray Rambler wagon. The one that the Oswald, or the Oswald lookalike, got into was reportedly green. And both the one that Oswald got into was reported to have been driven by a Latin-looking guy, and the guy, Mr. Carr, I think his name was, who saw the guy on the 6th floor of the school depository, said the driver of the wagon he saw was a dark-complected man. So I wonder whether that's the same Rambler wagon. And also, Mr. Carr said it wasn't Oswald. The guy he saw on the 6th floor wasn't Oswald. And also, he testified at the Clay Shaw trial. So he appeared. Yeah. So I think Jim Garrison had called him, I think. So he appeared. He testified at the Clay Shaw trial, and after the Clay Shaw trial, he was attacked and stabbed in his back and arm. So I personally think those people, I mean, that isn't just one of those things. That is somebody who's testified being attacked. But where's the uproar from the media talking about how justice must be defended and all that? So so I think these people who were intimidated, attacked, or murdered, I think, to me, it's just night and day. They're being attacked because what they're saying is the truth, or getting nearer to the truth.
Yeah, being silenced, aren't they? That's the thing.
So I think that guy that he's describing is what a lot of people think is Malcolm Wallace, and Malcolm Wallace was the person who created that palm print on the 6th floor. Or a lot of people think that palm print belongs to him. So that's kind of a bit of corroboration there.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I'm sure there are also a lot of witnesses who just didn't come forward as well because they couldn't be bothered, or more likely they didn't want to get involved for obvious reasons.
I think that's the case. I think it's also the case that a lot came forward that weren't even taken seriously.
Yeah.
You know. But right, Al, my friend, I've got to go to bed, mate. I'm afraid, because I've got to get up
that's
early
all right.
tomorrow, because I'll be on a 6th floor. Do you know what? When I was on that 6th floor today, I did look out the window. Well, I was on the 7th floor today, and I looked out the window and I looked down, and I thought, even with a bloody telescopic rifle, I could not have hit a moving target from up here. That's one of the reasons why I really want to go to Dealey Plaza, because I see just how incredible it would be to do that. You'd have to be the world's best ever marksman. You really would. And I just don't buy it. I just don't buy it.
Yeah, I'd like to. I want to go for similar reasons to you, but not only Dealey Plaza. I just want to get a feel for the whole scenario. You know, Oak Cliff, Love Field, just to get a feel for the scale of it, and also the timelines as well. You know, try and get an idea of the timelines in my own head.
How long it takes to get from one to another? Yeah.
You know, I think also Oak Cliff. So Jack Ruby. So Oswald lived in Oak Cliff, but Jack Ruby didn't live that far away either. So and also his landlady, Oswald's landlady, had connections with Ruby. So I mean, Jack Ruby. I mean, how many people does he know?
Yeah.
Okay, Jason. Thanks for the contribution today. Then this is going to be a long haul, so we just have to do it as and when we have time, I think.
Yeah, and just as a parting note, I mean, it's how many years is it? Is it 58 years?
Yeah.
58 years. So here we are, 58 years later, to the day, still no clearer.
Well, I think people say it's no clear. I think it is clear. It's just that there's no acknowledgement from the people at the top that it's clearer. So, you know, you hear all these bogus arguments that somebody would have talked. Yeah, that's right. They did talk. It's just that you're saying that they didn't talk.
I know they're 6 foot under.
So, I think, you know, the Kennedy assassination marked stamp proof the arrival of like George Bush years later talked about a new world order. I think it signified the new world order, and Kennedy perhaps was gonna, by breaking up the CIA into 1,000 small pieces, was threatening it.
Oh, he was definitely a threat to the establishment. Yeah.
Okay, anyway, Jace, let's finish there and we pick up again from where we've left off.
All right, mate. Cool.